Welcome to Six African Trade Talks. Dave, how are you?
Very good, Chad. Good to see you again.
Dave, as we catch up and follow on the events and things happening on our continent, we would like to hear from you as usual. And as we prepare for the Intra-Africa Trade Fair in Egypt, I would like to jump on to our first question. The AAAM has been working for several years now with an ambitious vision to develop automotive manufacturing across Africa. Talk to us about progress made and whether you remain that optimistic.
So right now, we're actually sitting in a place of step change for the auto industry in Africa. We have 6 countries, and we've never had this before, that are either implementing automotive policies or going to approve to implement these policies. And these countries are Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Algeria, Egypt, Kenya, and Nigeria. So significant progress has been made. In February this year in Botswana, the African Continental Free Trade Area member states approved a continental strategy that we developed. And this is an automotive strategy that we developed in conjunction with the African Union, with the AFCFTA Secretariat, Afreximbank, UNECA, ASO. And it was adopted as a living document, and a task force has been set up to implement the strategy. There is incredible alignment now on the continent regarding the industrialization and growth of the auto sector. We've never been in this position, so I'm extremely optimistic. The right players are in the room. Those players who actually participate in the development of the strategy. And what's very important is that the private sector is growing, that supports the development of the industry in Africa. And AAAM represents the private sector. We've got some very strong members who believe in Africa and who want to participate in the future. So yes, I'm very positive about it.
It's good to hear such positive news, especially as we look at how the AFCFTA is impacting change on our continent. So this is really great to hear. How do you see automotive-related trade between African countries actually taking place, and which countries are most likely to be part of the automotive supply chain?
I think one's got to start at the premise that the auto industry and the localization thereof requires scale. It's a very competitive landscape, and the AFCFTA offers us that scale. But not every country can assemble a vehicle. Those countries that I mentioned just now, those 6, will be hub assemblers in the different quadrants of Africa. Right now, there is a continental-wide value chain study taking place under the funding of Afreximbank to look at what role countries will play in this value chain in Africa. So some countries may process minerals. There's a lot of coverage right now about electrification and batteries required and the scarcity of the resources. Africa is well endowed with those resources. And you will see certain countries coming into play and playing a role in the battery value chain, for example. So some countries may focus on components, supplying the hub assemblers. So you will see hub assemblers develop like those that I mentioned, but you may get some others that specialize in niche segments of the auto sector. So it's critical that a country defines what it's going to do in the value chain and focus on that and let the region support it in what it's doing. And that way we'll get inclusivity across Africa. Some countries may opt not to participate, but I believe that most countries will participate and find their role in developing the scale. So we see a 4-step process to this evolution. The first is development of hub assemblers. The second is to bring in the value chain supporting those hubs, be it from raw material up to components and services. The third is we see these regions trading with each other across Africa. And that's very important because our members, which are the OEMs, the CEOs are very clear that a vehicle will only be manufactured or assembled in one location in Africa. So you'll have a specific model not manufactured in 2 locations. The OEM might manufacture themselves in 2 locations, but they'll be very model specific as to what is made where to ensure scale. And the 4th step is all of this under the AFCFTA. So there's a clear strategy And that's articulated in the Continental Strategy that was approved.
Interesting. As you're speaking, as you may know, my origin is from Zimbabwe. And I remember I was once involved in the mining sector and doing research, learning to know that platinum, Zimbabwe is a platinum producer. Platinum is used for catalytic converters. And I always thought that, what if Zimbabwe just became a catalytic converter manufacturing country to supply the whole world? So these are interesting things that you're coming up with. And recently, I think there was also lithium mining investment in Zimbabwe to the tune of over $300 million, as an example. And so these are things that I think you are talking about. So great to hear about such things. The AFCFTA is being hailed as a game changer for intra-African automotive trade and the development of African manufacturing supply chains. Are you optimistic that it will in fact have this effect? And secondly, are you satisfied at the pace of developments around the AFCFTA trading? I know you've touched about it already in the previous question, but just your overall feeling.
So today on the continent, the new vehicle demand in Africa is 1.1 million new vehicles.
Is that per annum?
Per annum, correct, yes. At the same time, there is an unregulated importation of between 3 and 5 million used vehicles into Africa. It's significant. And many of those vehicles are not roadworthy. And we're busy dealing with that now. We recently presented to the Standards Authority also in Africa to develop a harmonized standard on used vehicles that we must actually demand of the exporting country to meet. For example, Europe is the biggest exporter of used vehicles to Africa. And it's unacceptable that those vehicles are leaving the shores of Europe not roadworthy. So we are actually asking for countries, that's all you need to do. Just make sure it meets your own roadworthy standards, and that'll have a big impact in Africa. At the same time, we understand that used vehicles are a fundamental part of any automotive ecosystem because they do provide affordable mobility. So we see the future of used vehicles coming from vehicles assembled in Africa that meet minimum standards and that attract vehicle finance because they have value to them. So we see that ecosystem being developed. That said, we see that with the right policies and ecosystems being implemented across Africa, that 1.1 million new vehicle demand by 2035 will at least meet 3.3 million vehicles and potentially 5 million vehicles. So there's huge potential with the understanding that Africa has its own second-hand vehicle ecosystem. So we believe that the AFCFTA will provide that scale. Now that we have a strategy and a task force where members of African states can participate, that you will see this being rolled out and we will see the value chains develop. Your question about the timing, it does take time and it's not going to happen in a year to actually develop this industry and integrate these value chains. So that's why I mentioned 2035. So what we need stable industrial policy to attract investment for automotive that will withstand political change in countries. It needs to be passed into law, and it's a medium to long-term industry. So we started the journey. I'm very optimistic. You'll see investments taking place in the shorter term, but it might not be CKD, fully integrated plants. It might be semi-knocked down as a transition to a fully integrated industry. So it's a process, and I am really delighted with the progress of countries to actually go down this path and implement.
Certainly, really looking forward to see that transformation. As you were speaking, you also spoke about Nigeria earlier on, and I remember seeing an article that Dangote is now assembling trucks from China. And this is exactly what you're talking about, to say at the end of the day, it will be a phased approach. Is that correct?
It is a phased approach. So not only with vehicles, you might see a semi-knockdown initially moving to completely knockdown as the volumes pick up, but you may also see that on components. So a transitional arrangement, which can also de-risk the investment, will be available through the value chain. It's clear.
Interesting. Thank you. In your opinion, what should automotive companies who aim to be part of regional or African manufacturing supply chain be doing in preparation or to position themselves for a potential automotive boom?
My advice is that the organization should stay close to what's going on in Africa. Come participate with us in creating this future. But it's very important to understand what countries are driving what segment in their policy implementation, because then you can decide where you fit into the value chain and what country you should be focusing on. The second is not only just staying close, but come and visit the countries. You're not going to make a decision sitting behind your desktop. If you do that, you're going to miss it. You've got to come into Africa. You've got to come and visit the ecosystem and actually meet the players. Get yourself in a position where you can actually have a partner that you know that should this policy be implemented, these are our potential partners, and you can actually collaborate with them. But be ready. My advice is be on the front foot. Don't wait for this. If you wait, there are companies out there already who are visiting African countries and players and are actually making choices in advance of an investment decision.
Interesting. As you're talking as well, some memory came up. I was in Kenya about 4 weeks ago, and I was looking at the second-hand vehicle market there. And there's one company, which is a Japanese company, that actually imports cars from South Africa to Kenya. So it's exactly, and I'm sure this is someone that came into Kenya, so there was an opportunity, and they probably visited South Africa and decided to join the two. And if you look at the distance between Kenya and South Africa and Japan and Kenya, you would see that it should be easier to take vehicles from South Africa to Kenya and vice versa. So yeah, visiting these countries is very important. As hosts of the Africa Automotive Show, speak to us about its significance, what is planned, and how role players can benefit.
So at the show, there will be two elements to it from an automotive perspective, an exhibition and a forum. So this year, the exhibition, we're actually in a prime position in the main hall. So we will see a great deal of traffic coming through to visit. I promote the fact that companies should come and exhibit and show what they're capable of. You will have organizations wanting to partner. They will come and visit, and they'll come from all over Africa wanting to prove their own capability. Because it's very important that there's many manufacturers in Africa today that are not OEM capable suppliers across Africa. They may be making spare parts, or they may be in allied industries wanting to make parts. And they need to take themselves to a different level to be able to get OEM accreditation for supply. And that's why it's important to create these linkages and partnerships, that one knows who to partner with in specific countries where they show intention. So it will be very good to actually come and connect, because really doing business in Africa, you need to connect. You need to find the right linkages, right, in the ecosystem, so that one actually can create a clear strategy and path of what you want to do in specific countries. So that's the one side about the exhibition. The other is the forum. And it's important to come in here and understand what's going on in Africa, who the players are, which countries are advancing, how the value chains are actually being considered at the moment, because research has been done, as I mentioned, that some of that research feedback will be given. We've also are doing a powertrain study right now in Egypt, funded by the German government, to look at how the new energy value chains will develop and the powertrains will develop in Egypt as a pilot, because not every segment is just going to go and become electric quickly. You've got other technologies on the horizon, for example, hydrogen and others. And also the cost of electrification at the moment is quite prohibitive, and many can't afford that. So it won't just race off in one direction. You'll see a transition from ICE, and it will depend on affordability factors and local factors. And those transitions will take time, and segments may differ in that transition. Now, we believe that in the public transport and in the 2 and 3 wheelers, you're already seeing electric mobility taking place. But passenger cars, for example, will lag, predominantly because of affordable reasons. So that study will be actually shared at the forum. So it'll be a place to learn, to understand what's going on in Africa, and to become relevant in this process.